I'm sure everybody remembers the blockbuster hit Night at the Museum, and if you don't, the synopsis is very narrowed down to this. Ben Stiller, who is hired as a night watchman for the Museum of Natural History, takes the job for the night shift. However, much to his surprise, a magical tablet brings many of the museum's exhibits to life at night. Now, if you happen to be a dinosaur-obsessed child when first watching this film like I was, then Rexy, the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton, was probably your favorite character. And for your information, Rexy is actually based off the real-world Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton in the actual Museum of Natural History named Sue. Now, within the events of the first Night at the Museum movie, Rexy first appears as a very frightening and vicious Tyrannosaurus Rex, and when Larry is attending his first shift on his first night, he actually notices that Rexy is missing from his exhibit. So he goes wandering around thinking that Cecil, one of the guys that actually introduced him to the job, is playing a prank on him. And it is made crystal clear that this is no prank because he walks down the hallway and sees Rexy taking a drink of water from the water fountain. Much to his horror, Rexy stops, looks at him, and roars at him. This causes Larry to run in absolute horror, probably shitting his pants. He goes and he hides underneath one of the desks within the visitor's area, and he proceeds to call Cecil and asks him what he's supposed to do. Cecil says that you're supposed to look at the instructions, and he finds the instructions and sees that he's supposed to throw the bone. Rexy then wrenches the desk out from Larry Daly, and Larry, feeling very frightened, horrified, and exposed, Rexy drops one of his ribs. Larry throws the rib and begins to run. This is when it's revealed that Rexy is actually not a frightening monster at all, but rather just a dog. His personality, his characterization within the films is that of a dog. In subsequent sequels that followed the success of the original Night at the Museum, Rexy really doesn't have a huge role to play in the other films, and is just kind of a side character. However, let's get to the point of this video. Rexy dying. No, this never happens in any of the actual films, but rather a spin-off book that's actually connected to the films. Now, for those of you who actually read Night at the Museum, Nick's Tales, and Night of the Dragons, the scene where Rexy actually dies made me cry, but don't worry, there is a happy ending for Rexy. So, with that being said, I'm going to now read to you the parts of note when it comes to Rexy's demise within Night of the Dragons. Rasputin laughed. He extended a hand atop his eyes and pretended to search. I don't see him anywhere. He raised the cane, and the crystal glowed red. Tisk, tisk. It's always the children. Something struck Nick hard. It was Joan. She dove out from cover and tackled him. They flew to the side, away from the approaching fireball. Rasputin ran up to them before they could rise. Ah, now I have both of you. Before he could level the cane at them, a deafening roar filled the hall. Loud footsteps vibrated the ground, and Rexy ran out from the Ice Age wing and swung his head at the Russian. The bony skull connected, and Rasputin flew across the room, and he tumbled to the ground, knocking down Neanderthals like bowling pins. He quickly became buried in a pile of cavemen. Nick and Joan got to their feet. Way to go, Rexy, yelled Nick. The T-Rex skeleton lowered its skull so that Nick could give him a scratch. Even Joan patted him on the head. You have your own dragon, eh? Said a voice from across the hall. Rasputin evacuated himself from the pile. Neanderthals. Let's see what it can do. Rasputin raised his cane, and a cloud of red smoke emerged from the crystal. It grew larger and larger, yet showed no signs of dissipating. When the cloud grew over 40 feet tall, it formed a horned head and split to create a large mouth and rows of teeth. Forelegs and feet extended to the ground. Each foot had long, sharp talons with two leathery rings sprouted from the beast's back. And where the smoke tapered toward the crystal, a long tail formed, whipping back and forth. The smoke solidified, and the shape of a dragon, a red dragon. The crimson dragon took a step forward and gave a ferocious roar. It bellowed so loudly the front windows shattered. It made Rexy's roar sound like a growling chihuahua. Still, the T-Rex skeleton put himself between the dragon and the two kids. Nick and Joan moved back against the beasts, sized each other up, and Rexy was quick to strike. He leaped forward, spun around, whipping his tail. The bony appendage connected, pounding against the dragon's head. The red beast stumbled and flapped its wings for balance. The wind blew over in every direction, the information desk sending brochures flying everywhere. And when the dragon recovered, it whipped its own tail, knocking Rexy across the floor. As Rexy clambered to its feet, the dragon inhaled deeply. Its crimson eyes glowed brightly. Nick and Joan were standing behind the T-Rex skeleton. "This can't be good," Nick said. "Come on." The two scampered down the front hall and dove behind the stone bench. The dragon exhaled and flames engulfed Rexy. Joan whimpered as the flames lapped over the bench. When the fire died down, Nick snuck a peek, and Rexy was still standing, but his bones were glowing red, and the T-Rex roared so loudly. Said Rasputin. "Wrong sort of dragon." He raised his cane, and a column of blue smoke emerged from the smoke grew until it solidified into a large blue dragon. Still glowing, Rexy snapped at the blue dragon. The new beast inhaled, its blue eyes flashed, and then an icy white cloud erupted from its mouth and engulfed Rexy. It was as if the skeleton was swallowed in the spray from a giant fire extinguisher. Sharp cracks sounded all over Rexy's body. When the mist disappeared, Rexy was frozen solid. The red dragon roared and spun around, slapping the giant skeleton with its tail. Rexy shattered into a million pieces. "No!" shouted Nick as he stood. Joan grabbed him and pulled him out of the main chamber. As they ran out, just as the blue dragon blasted the front of the museum with another white cloud, Rasputin laughed as he climbed onto the back of the red dragon. The blue dragon rammed at the frozen front of the museum. In an explosion of brick and glass, it tore through the front wall. Rasputin's dragon galloped after it. The museum lights flickered and went out. In seconds, the emergency lighting system activated. The destruction was bathed in faint ember glow. Nick and Joan ran back into the hall through the giant breach in the museum. They watched the two dragons fly out over Central Park. Nick sat on a broken stone and put his face in his hands. What was he going to do without his father? Now, at the end of the book, now this is there's still lots more action, but at the end of the book, Larry Daly actually comes back to life. He was actually frozen by the villain, by Rasputin, earlier in the book. And so they go over to the guy, I forget his name, I haven't seen the films in a long time, but they go over to the guy that actually controls the tablet to see if he can bring Rexy back to life. And this is actually pretty interesting, so I'm going to read that part as well. "What?" asked Larry. "What?" said Rasputin. Nick smiled up at his dad. "Doctor's orders," Larry shrugged and turned back to the main hall. "Attila the Huns." "You heard him." The Huns roared with laughter as they dragged Rasputin up the stairs. "Now," said the pharaoh. He held up his tablet. "Let's see about what we can do about this destruction." "Wait, you can fix this?" asked Nick. Achman-Ross smiled. "Of course. The mischief caused by the tablet can always be reversed." The tablet, he leaned over, railing everyone. "Please stand clear." The remaining mannequins moved away from the breach in the wall, and the pharaoh raised the tablet high over his head. "Pata, Sika, Atara, Fara, Na," he said, in a booming voice. "Para, Dasara, Fara, Mintara, Akmenhacha." Suddenly, chunks of brick and stone began sliding across the floor, and then they tumbled and bounced toward the opening. Piece by piece, the debris rose and reformed and returned to the front wall. Shards of glass screeched as they slid across the room, joining smaller pieces as seamlessly as water flowing toward a puddle. Once the glass panes were complete and they floated up to place themselves onto the large window opening, knots of metal, strips, and tubing that were once part of the revolving doors untangled and reformed. The revolving doors rebuilt themselves inside their repair cylinders. It wasn't long before the entire main floor looked all new. That remained was strewn rubble that was once Rexy. Too bad you couldn't restore the stone dragon, said Joan. He fought most bravely. Akmenroth smiled. Ah, wait for it. As with the building, debris, bits of the T-Rex skeleton began to converge. It was as if the invisible hands were reassembling most complicated three-dimensional puzzle of all time. What might have taken paleontologists years to do, the magic of the tablet was doing in seconds. It wasn't long before Rexy stood before them, almost complete. Then a single rib emerged from hiding place and rose into the air. After it locked into place, Rexy came to life, letting out a loud, thunderous roar. That's the cool thing about Akmenroth's tablet, given that it already brings the exhibits within the Museum of Natural History to life. It can also reverse certain effects, at least according to Night of the Dragons, which is how we can have Rexy back after he was ruthlessly killed by both a ice dragon and a fire dragon. So yeah, Rexy did not die permanently. He was brought back by Akmen-Ra, and pretty cool for people who actually thought Rexy was dead. It's nice for them to get revealed that no, Rexy did not die. He was just, well, he did die, but he came back because of the magic of the tablet. So there you go. That's the time that Rexy died. Now, I do consider this book to be canon, even though it was heavily marketed as its own story, because we actually have characters like Nick himself reference things that happened within the movies. Like, there's even a part where after Rexy is killed by the two dragons, where Nick is actually remembering that he used to ride Rexy. He used to get this rug, this disheveled rug, and he would put it on Rexy's back as a saddle because Rexy's like vertebrae would hurt him, so he would use it as a saddle, which I thought was really cool. And it seriously made me even more sad knowing that Rexy was dead and he was just thinking about it. And it's stuff like this that actually harkens back to the original films. But let me know what you guys think about this book. Were you sad when Rexy died? Were you happy when he was brought back? And if you yourself believe this to be part of the canon when it comes to the Night at the Museum movies. With that being said, do take care, have a great night, and I'll see ya in the next video.